Okay, so the last two teachings in Revelation, we were focused on the identity of Babylon the Great. It's a mystery of sorts. There's unknown things, especially to John. There was things unknown back in the first century. And there's still unknown things for us. We do know she's a harlot, and she's a witch of sorts, spreading her sorcery around the world. She spreads her message of wickedness all over the world. Her message is one of idolatry and sexual immorality. We know that she loves to persecute and to kill the saints, the people of God. In fact, she gets intoxicated on it. She gets high off of it. She is a city, not a country. But everything that is said about her is actually said about the majority of the people who dwell in her. Not the buildings and the ground and the mountains and hills necessarily, like as if those things could be immoral. But the people who dwell in her are the ones who are being referred to. Yet there are saints in her, probably for the purpose of winning souls to Christ, that God at some point in time calls to come out of her. She is located in the wilderness. She is covetous and greedy, loving all the riches the world makes available to her, whether clothing, precious gems and jewels. Whatever the world has available, she desires it and loves it. But she doesn't really produce the necessities of life herself. So she's completely dependent upon others to bring such goods to her. Her influence is widespread among people groups, just normal people, and up in the higher ups, people who are in place of rulers. It's widespread among different people groups around the world, and all throughout the world, she spreads her message of wickedness and vileness. And obviously God hates her and will use the very beast that she rides upon to destroy her in 1 hour of one day. This will be astonishing and surprising to most people of the world. But when God finally wipes her out, her destruction will be final and absolute. No recovery, ever, from God's destruction. The kings of the earth and the merchants of the earth will weep over her destruction. Yet they will do this at a distance for fear over her torment that they might have to endure some of it themselves. Yet God will tell his people to rejoice over the vengeance he has brought upon her because of what she did to them. At this point, we don't really know exactly who she is. We've considered many possibilities. New York City, the original Babylon, over in the Middle East and Iraq. You've considered maybe some Muslim cities. You've considered different places, none of which match everything perfectly. So we must resist the temptation to say we do know who she is if some places do not fit all the qualifications. The Lord will make things clear to us in his timing, whenever that may be. We need not jump ahead out of some kind of pride, intellectual, spiritual pride or suspicion. Remember, crying wolf will help no one when the wolf finally comes. Does everyone here know what that means? Does anyone here not know what the crying wolf means? Seamus, you know what crying wolf means? No? Okay, well, I'll explain it to you. So as a boy, he was watching over shepherds. He was a shepherd boy, watching over the sheep as a shepherd. And he would play a game with the people of the town, and he would cry, "Wolf, wolf, wolf!" And the people of the town would come running out and find out here was this smiling boy laughing at them because he fooled them. He tricked them. There was no wolf. He did it several times, and then finally a wolf actually came. And he cried, "Wolf, wolf, wolf!" And the people of the town did not listen to him because he had fooled them and tricked them and lied to them so many times. At the end of this story, the moral of the story, according to the Greek version, is this. This shows how liars are rewarded. Even if they tell the truth, no one believes them. And in a later version of the story, I think it's the English version, the wolf actually eats the bull as well. So when it comes to theology, especially eschatology, because so many people who claim to be Christians, so many different views, have already done this around the world, saying certain things are the mark of the beast, or certain things are the Antichrist, or certain things are the beast. All these different identities in the book of Revelation that we don't, we need to figure out these things. And so they've tried wolf so many times, to the point where if you even mention the terminology mark of the beast, people will probably just scoff at you. And we need not to cry wolf. To make sure we're accurate. And when we know for sure, then we cry wolf. Because then the real wolf is coming. And everyone will need to be warned. And we do not have blood on our own hands because of crying wolf, saying something is not. So we need to resist the temptation to say, oh, I have it all figured out. I believe it's this or that or this. And make sure we have all our ducks in a row. So for the next couple, at least today and next week, maybe the week after that too, we're going to, or the teaching after that, well, we're going to be talking about another identity. Who is this beast? Who is she riding upon? Now, throughout the time of me talking about the harlot, I've kind of made you assume that what I was saying was true, but we're going to talk about that today. So we'll start today on who is the beast, who she is riding. Okay? And the first verse we're going to look at is Revelation 17:3. So he carried me away, one of the angels that is, who had the last 7 bowls, carried John away in the spirit, so like in a vision, into the wilderness. And I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So we see this beast, the woman sits upon it. The beast is scarlet, a dark red in color. So she's on the same team as the harlot. They have the same colors. It's full of names of blasphemy. Blasphemy is when you malign the character of God, when you say something is God when it really isn't. This is one of the main problems I have with Calvinism, besides the fact that it's not biblical, is it blasphemes my God. It misrepresents my God. It attributes something to him that is not true. Many things to him that are not true. And this beast will be no different. He'll say something is God or someone is God and therefore misrepresent who God really is. In other words, they're engaging in idolatry. And this God that this beast represents probably will have similarities to the God of the Bible. And if you talk to certain religions, they'll even tell you at first, oh, we have the same God. Mormons will say that too. But the whole premise of Mormonism is that they began their religion to correct all the errors in the modern day church, that they're all led astray. But they'll start out with saying, oh, we have the same God. Deception, lies. Jehovah's Witnesses say the same thing. Mormonism believes that the God of our solar system was once a human on another planet. That is not the God I serve. The God of Jehovah's Witnesses says that Jesus Christ is Michael the archangel in the flesh. That is not the God I serve. Muslims will come up to you and say, yeah, we have the same God. We believe in Jesus too. I had this discussion recently. I can't remember what the context was, but there's a Muslim that came up to me and said, yes, we have the same God as you. I said, no, we don't. I said, did your God die on the cross? Did your God have a son? Can you only be saved through his shed blood? They have all these things wrong, but they'll come up to you trying to deceive you, saying we have the same God. So religions will do that. So it's very important you know all about your God. And if you know all about your God and someone says something about their God and they say your God and their God is the same thing, you'll be able to point out, well, that's not my God. We can't be worshiping the same God. Well, my God predestined all things that come to pass. He picks and chooses from the beginning, from eternity past, who goes to heaven, who goes to hell. That is not my God. You understand? That's not my God. So I say, well, my God lets me sin as much as I want, and I'm still going to his kingdom in the end. That is not my God. You understand? So someone say, well, my God is not a Trinity. He's oneness in all ways, and even in personhood. That's not my God. So it's important that we understand who our God is. And blasphemy is misrepresenting our God, maligning his character. And this beast does that. He maligns the character of God. He has 7 heads and 10 horns. And we'll get more into that here in a little bit. Revelation 17:7. But the angel said to me, why did you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has 7 heads and 10 horns. Not only is she sitting on the beast is carrying her from place to place. That'd be the difference between me sitting on a horse and a horse carrying me from place to place. There's a difference. It's a slight difference, but it's different. So he's carrying her all over the place. She's not just sitting up on him. He's carrying her all over the place. Go to Revelation 12. And we'll look at starting in verse 3. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 diadems on his heads. And his tail drew a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. And a dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth to devour her child as soon as it was born. And so we see that it's great in size. This beast is great in size, not a small beast. It's great in size, great in power. Now it's described as fiery red. I don't see there's much difference between fiery red and scarlet, but here it's described as fiery red. And here, he described as having 7 heads and 10 horns once again, but this time he is said to have 7 crowns. That'll be important to remember later on. 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns. And with his tail, he drew a third of the stars of heaven to earth. Now, who do you think that's talking about? Yeah, the devil. Yeah. Who did he take a third of to the earth with him? Matthew? The angels. Third, the angels are deceived and they're dragged into his influence with his tail and brought into rebellion along with him against the God of the universe. And we see that in verse 4, he wanted to devour. I'm sure your Bible probably has child capitalized there, or mine does. Wanted to devour Jesus as soon as he was born. What is that likened back to? What happened shortly after Jesus was born? Well, Herod, under the inspiration, he was crucified? Well, that's not what I'm talking about. Herod, under the inspiration of the devil, wanted to destroy Jesus before he was 2 years old. So we know who was the motivating factor there. People might point to Herod or his wanting to be in power, his paranoia. All these things are true. He was a wicked man. He was a very confused and deceived man, as history talks about him. But ultimately, the person behind him was the devil himself. He wants to destroy Jesus right from the beginning. Okay? Let's read starting in verse 7 now of chapter 12. And war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought. But they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So we see the dragon and his angels, this great beast with the 7 heads, the 10 horns, and the 7 crowns on his heads. He is now taking the angels, the stars from heaven, which he dragged with him with his tail, his influence. Now he's taking them and fighting against Michael, the archangel, and his angels. And this happens at some point in history. I think it's future at this point in history. And they lose. Obviously, they're losers. They're going to lose. And God will win every time. And Michael and his angels are on God's side. And so they lose and they are cast to the earth. And the dragon is directly called at this point the devil and Satan. That serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. So we know there'll be deception involved with this king. He deceives the whole world. And one thing I want you to notice, and I've said this before and throughout this series in Revelation, whether recent or years ago, that when the word beast is used, it can be used interchangeably in context to determine which one is talking about, of the king, the ruler of that kingdom, or of the kingdom itself. Okay? And we see this happening right from the beginning. We see him called the devil and Satan, the serpent of old, who deceives the whole world. We'll see later on, probably next time in chapter 13, we'll see him called, be talking about the actual kingdom underneath the influence of Satan, underneath the control of Satan. Okay, Daniel chapter 2. We'll start in verse 31. So the backdrop to this is Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, and he's very disturbed by this dream. And the dream is very explicit, and he wants his quote-unquote wise men to tell him not only the interpretation of the dream, but the dream itself. Now, why do you think Nebuchadnezzar would do something like that? So they wouldn't make it up. That's right. Well, not only that, why else would they do it?
They would surely know that God revealed it to them.
Ah, see. So that he will know that their interpretation is given from some other outside source. The same source, Nebuchadnezzar is assuming the same source that gave him the dream in the first place. The only source that knows his dream is the one who gave it to him. You can come to me and try to guess what I dreamed last night, if I had a dream at all. But you'd be guessing, unless the God of gods revealed it to you. Okay, so this, for Nebuchadnezzar's perspective, it assures he will not be deceived by, he's probably skeptical about them. We don't have anything experience he's had with them up to this point, but he's probably had experiences with them where they have said things that, well, that doesn't make much sense to me. He's probably questioning, skeptical about what they're saying. But this is one way he can assure for himself, for his own sake, that he will get the truth. So starting in verse 31, we're going to see what the God of heaven revealed to Daniel about the dream and the interpretation. Verse 31. You, O king, were watching, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose splendor was excellent, stood before you, and its form was awesome. This image's head was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You watched while a stone was cut out without hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay, and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed together and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. The wind carried them away so that no trace of them was found. And the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This is the dream. Now we will tell the interpretation of it before the king. You, O king, are a king of kings. The God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field and the birds of the heaven, he has given them into your hand and has made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold. But after you shall arise another kingdom, inferior to yours. Then another, a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, and as much as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything, and like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. Whereas you saw the feet of toes, and toes partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, if the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. In the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and shall stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God is made known to the king. What will come to pass after this? The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. And of course, Nebuchadnezzar bowed down, prostrate, giving glory to the God of Daniel for revealing these things to him. Now in verse 34, I want you to notice this, okay? The stone struck the feet. It didn't strike the head. It didn't strike the chest. It didn't even strike the legs, the thighs, the belly. It struck the feet. And we know that this kingdom God will set up is his kingdom. Okay? It's when Jesus returns and set up his kingdom, this 1,000-year millennial reign. And so we know when the stone, which is cut without hands, struck the feet, that is the kingdom that will be in place when Jesus returns. Yet, all of those kingdoms will come crashing down because the kings of this earth will cast their crowns before the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. They'll have no power any longer, but the saints will receive the kingdom, the power. We'll read about that here in a second in Daniel 7. And so the stone struck the feet, not the legs or anywhere else. Verse 35. All of those kingdoms were crushed together. They were done from there on out. Now in verse 38, he begins to give the interpretation. And he says that Nebuchadnezzar and his kingdom, of course, interchangeably once again, is the head of gold. And in verse 39 it says, but after you shall arise another kingdom inferior to yours. All it says about that kingdom, that it shall arise after yours, is inferior to yours, this kingdom of silver. That's the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians, which conquers Babylon, but is never as great as Babylon is at its peak. So Babylon at its peak, Medes and Persia at its peak, you know it's not as strong, not as valuable, because we have gold and we have silver. The third kingdom is one that shall rule over all the earth. Does it literally rule over like all of Africa, all of South America, all of North America? No. Australia? No. But over their known earth at that point in time, it rules over all of it. In fact, this is the Greek kingdom. And the Greek kingdom goes so far from Greece all the way over to India. So you can picture a map in your mind of the Middle East. You see Greece, and then it goes over to Turkey, and then it goes over to down to the Holy Land and Syria, and it goes to Iraq and Iran, and over to Pakistan and Afghanistan, and then India. And he does it in a short period of time. And it goes down to Egypt as well, and some of northern Africa. So this kingdom of Greece conquers at a very quick pace. And he rules over all the earth, is what it's called. But his kingdom of bronze does not last very long. Eventually, the kingdom of Greece is divided into 4 parts. After Alexander the Great, who led him to conquering these things, dies at a young age. The fourth kingdom, verse 40. The fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. So this kingdom is going to encompass the kingdoms that came before it. Whatever the kingdom of Babylon conquered, it will conquer. Whatever the kingdom of the Medo-Persians conquered, it will conquer it. Whatever the kingdom of Greece conquered, it will conquer it. All of that area. And it will break in pieces and crush all the others. Very fierce, very violent, very destructive in its power. Verse 41. Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. And the strength of the iron shall be in it. This you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. Now, this is where the interesting part comes from, in my opinion. So we have the legs, and this is starting at the knee now. The word for legs there for iron is shin. So the lower leg. And we saw that the bronze was encompassing the thigh, which is the upper leg. So the lower legs are just pure iron. There's no ceramic clay mixed in with that. And so we have to wonder within us, it doesn't say anything explicitly here that I can see. We have to wonder, is there two parts to this kingdom? Is there a first coming of this kingdom where it's just iron, which is the lower leg, and then a second part where the feet and the toes are partly iron and partly ceramic clay. So we have to wonder about that. That makes me think about those things. But we see the reason why iron and clay are spoken of is because iron and clay do not mix. Now, as I studied about this, I think in recent days and recent years and modern technology, we have found ways to mix it to some degree. But if you just take iron and clay and try to mix them, they're not going to mix together. It's like oil and water, okay? Now, oil and water, if you have a grease fire in the kitchen, say you're cooking up some nice scrumptious bacon, and the bacon is just almost done, and you walk away for a minute and forget about the bacon, and the bacon starts to get burnt, and then it catches on fire. You're like, oh no, it's on fire. What's the first thing you think to put fire out? Water. You throw water, a bucket of water, and the fire just spreads all over the place. Doesn't put it out. Water cannot put oily fire out, greasy fire out. You take some baking soda or a fire extinguisher of sorts, something to smother it to take out the oxygen. It will not put it out. And that's what it's like with clay and iron. They do not mix together. Verse 42, and as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. Verse 43, as you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men. They will not adhere to one another, just as the iron does not mix with clay. So there's a separation here. It doesn't say who the they is. They will mingle with the seed of men. Who is the they? I don't know who the they is. I think the they is the iron. I think the seed of men is the clay. And obviously there's something that separates this group of people, this iron of maybe the first stage of this kingdom, and the clay of men. Something is dividing them, separating them, keeping them apart. Something doesn't mix together for some reason, whatever that may be. Maybe the religion of this iron is objectionable to some who are in the ceramic clay, the seed of men. And they're not willing to receive everything they say, but for some reason they're under the power. You know, we can kind of try to figure things out here, but for some reason, it will not mingle together. And there's a separation between the two groups. Something they cannot agree on, something they cannot mix together with. You know, one thing I've thought about in recent, I'm not saying this is it, but in recent days, I've seen a lot of China mixing with the Muslim world. I've seen a lot of that. But in China, if you know anything about Western China, they're actually persecuting Muslims. They're performing like experiments upon them. They're making them slaves. They're taking the women and making them sterile so they can't have children. They're doing lots of wicked things to Muslims. But at the same time, they're like joining together with Iran and trying to help them out. You know, so there's things. China is not a God-fearing country of any God. They're mostly atheistic, communistic. And so there's people there, obviously, who love Jesus. There's churches there who love Jesus, who follow Jesus, who spread the word of God. But China as a government, as a kingdom, and as their ruler who represents their kingdom, they are completely atheistic. And they would be against Islam. But, you know, there's kind of a mixture going on there. But they're not mixing together perfectly. You know, it's like oil and water. Atheists and Islam, that doesn't mix together. You go to the Islamic country where Sharia law, the Muslim law, is reigning. Atheism is not reigning there. It's not. They're not trying to push atheism. They're not having debates between atheists and Muslims, and people are being turned to atheism in droves. It does not happen. Okay, so they don't mix. That's an example of what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen in the end days, what it's talking about here, but that's an example of that. There's nothing that mixes together those two groups, except for maybe they have a certain groups they hate. They both hate. So it's like two enemies become friends because they have a common foe, a common enemy. And that's what it's talking about. But either way, we're going to see in the end, when this kingdom comes, we'll see that groups will come together that we never thought would ever come together. That it doesn't make sense that they come together. Even from their perspective, it doesn't make sense that they would come together, but they come together anyway, and they mix together. And there's strength in them. There's strength in them. The strength of the iron is in them, but there's also fragility in them. Probably in the relationship to each other, there's fragility. Verse 44, in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms shall stand forever. And so, one thing I want to point out is this, is when we look at our feet, 2 normal feet, how many toes do we see? 10. 10 toes. And so we saw earlier, as we were looking through Revelation, we saw that there was 10 horns. You know, a horn oftentimes, it represents power, strength. You know, when someone goes to war, they blow a horn. When someone has victory, they blow a horn. So it represents strength, power. Okay, let's turn to Daniel 7 now. So what we see so far, we can look at the other kingdoms too, but we want to focus on the last kingdom. That's what we're talking about here in Revelation, the last kingdom on earth. It's against God's people, it's against the Holy Land, against God. And we saw that in Revelation it had 7 heads, 10 horns, 7 crowns, great in size and power, fiery red. The woman is riding upon it. His name's of blasphemy, misrepresenting God. It wanted to devour Jesus. It's representing by the devil himself, because he is the king over it eventually. And now we see in Daniel 2 that God destroys it in the end when he comes, is a mixture of 2 different groups of people who really shouldn't be mixed together, common sense-wise, logically speaking. And it has probably 2 parts to it, first of iron and then of iron clay, maybe 2 phases of it. And it has 10 toes, which goes back to, once again, the 10 horns. Now in Daniel 7, we're going to read starting in verse 2. This is a vision that Daniel had. Daniel spoke, saying, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. And 4 great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. The first was like a lion, and an eagle's wings. I watched till its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And suddenly another beast, a second like a bear. It was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And they said thus to it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I looked, and there was another, like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I was considering the horns. And there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. And there in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. We'll stop there just for a second, and we'll continue reading here a little bit. So in verses 2 and 3, we see mention of these beasts rising out of a place called the Great Sea. This is the Mediterranean Sea. So all 4 beasts will rise somewhere near the Mediterranean Sea, in that area of the world, and will conquer over parts of the world that are surrounding that Mediterranean Sea. In verse 4, it's obviously just describing, once again, the Babylonian kingdom. How do I know that? Well, several things. You see it's described as it's raised up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. What does that sound like? What does it sound like from the book of Daniel? Anything you can remember, you can think of from the book of Daniel that sounds like that? What about in Daniel chapter 4, when Nebuchadnezzar, he was boasting in pride of what he had done, and God humbled him and made him like a beast of the earth. And he crawled around on all 4s. His nails grew like beasts. He had like feathers on his body. It was so bad with the hair. And then eventually God gave him his right mind back. and he stood up on 2 feet and gave glory to the God of heaven. And so this is what is referring to here in verse 4, the kingdom of Babylon represented by Nebuchadnezzar. And of course, the kingdom of Babylon, on his flag, what do you find? A lion with wings. That is what's on the flag of the kingdom of Babylon. Verse 5, once again describes the Medo-Persian Empire. The empire was conquered, the Babylonian Empire. It was raised up on one side in this verse because one part of the kingdom was greater later on than it was earlier. Verse 6, once again, same kingdom described in Daniel 2, the third one, describes the kingdom of Greece under Alexander the Great. It conquered far, wide, and very quickly, and when he died, it split into 4 kingdoms. So we see it described once again. And then we see the last kingdom described here, kingdom, the 4th one. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong, had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with his feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. So in Daniel 2, it had 10 toes. In Daniel 7, it has 10 horns. In Revelation, it has 10 horns. The same kingdom. It's dreadful, it's terrible, it's exceedingly strong, had huge iron teeth, was devoured and broken pieces. And you can imagine a wild beast devouring things. And wild beasts aren't as, as nice and neat as we are when we eat, or some of us anyway. Some of us forget where our pie hole is sometimes. And they get it on their over here, and you get it over here when you eat instead. Well, really, it should go right there. But beasts don't eat like that. They don't wipe their face when they eat. They don't eat over their plate. They don't make sure they get it in the middle of their mouth so it all goes in their mouth where it's supposed to go. They eat and it's going all over the place. Have you ever watched a dog eat? And it's going all over, they have to lick up the crumbs afterwards. This beast does not lick up the crumbs. Whatever is left over that falls out of it, he just tramples it. Bam, bam, bam. He doesn't care about it. Just trampling under his feet, crushing it to dust. And it had 10 horns. Verse 8, I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by their roots. And there in his horn were like the eyes of man, and mouth speaking pompous words. The little horn is the Antichrist. It is the man possessed by Satan who will be one of the last rulers on this earth. And we see, why do we see 3 horns falling down before him? Well, later on we only see 7 heads, right? Why are there 10 horns and 7 heads? Because in the end there will only be 7 kingdoms, and he will rule over 3 of them in a very direct way, I believe. The rest of them kind of indirectly, but he'll still have power over them, authority over them. And we see he speaks pompous words, prideful words. And then starting in verse 9, let's read again. I watched till thrones were put in place, and the Ancient of Days was seated. His garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was a fiery flame, its wheels a burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him, and 1,000 thousands ministered to him. That's millions. 10,000 times 10,000, 100 million stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were open. Who is the Ancient of Days? Who is this in the scripture talking about? Huh? God the Father, that's right. It's got to be God the Father. We'll find out here in a second. I watched them because of the sound of the pompous words the horn was speaking. I watched till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. So this is different words being used, different symbolism being used. We saw in Daniel 2, a rock not made with hands crushed the feet, and the whole thing came crumbling down. And then the wind blew away like the dust from the shaft when they're on the threshing floor, when they're harvesting wheat. Now we see that he is devoured, he's slain, he's given to the burning flame, and he is devoured. This is what happens to the beast this time. This is the way he's destroyed in this symbolism, because of the pompous words spoken by the one horn on his head. As for the rest of the beast, what does that mean? The rest of the beast? The rest of the kingdoms of the earth. The rest of the kings of the earth. Not the ones involved in this beast with the 7 heads and 10 horns, but the rest of the kingdoms of the earth had their dominion taken away. There's that crown being cast before the feet of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Yet their lives were prolonged for a season at a time. So during the 1,000-year reign, Jesus returns. He wipes out the Antichrist, his army, his 200 million man army, and everybody who took the mark of the beast. They're all wiped out. They're all cast into Hades to await Judgment Day, or they're cast into the lake of fire. But everybody else, including unbelievers now, everyone else is given a chance to live under the reign of Jesus, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, to see what they will do now. That's mercy, man, from God. They don't deserve that chance. None of us deserve that chance. But God will give them this chance. If you want to read more about that, read in Zechariah 14. But that's what happens. Their lives are prolonged for a season and a time during the 1,000-year reign. Verse 13. I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. Who's that? That's Jesus Christ. He came to the Ancient of Days. Now, if they're the same person, how can you come to yourself? How can you ride in the clouds and come to yourself if you're the same person? He came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. They, the angels, brought him near before him. Not the same person. So Jesus is brought before the Father. Then to him, Jesus, was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom the one which shall not be destroyed. Jesus, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, name above every name, in which every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit within my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. I came near to one of those who stood by and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. Those great beasts, here's the interpretation. Once again, these great beasts, which are four kings. And if you have it in New King James Version, it probably has a footnote there, and it says what? Representing their kingdoms. So this beast, once again, is used interchangeably, kings and kingdoms referred to, which arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom, possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. So any aspiring to power in our day and age is vain. It's vanity. It's all going to be taken away. As children of God, we don't aspire to power and to fame and to those kind of things. We aspire to humility and servanthood and loving people and loving Jesus. That's what we aspire to. But one day, because we're being servants, the last shall become the first, the least shall become the greatest, the servant shall become the master, and we'll be given power over the kingdoms of this earth. And you look at the different letters to the churches in Revelation, churches of Asia in Revelation, they talk about this very thing. He who overcomes shall be given power. So we receive the kingdom forever and ever, the kingdom that shall not pass away. You know, all the kingdoms of the earth, they're all going to pass away. Even if America somehow, I doubt it, if it somehow lasts until the end, it will end then. You know, China, this great power that's rising up, Russia, this power that's rising up, they will come to an end. And all the men who aspire to be powerful and strong and have all the authority over everyone on this earth, they will pass away. They will lose their power forever. Verse 19. This is kind of getting to the important part here. Then I wished to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, which is teeth of iron, its nails of bronze, which devoured, broke in pieces, and trampled the residue with his feet. And the 10 horns are on its head, and the other horn which came up, before which 3 fell, namely that horn which had eyes and a mouth, which spoke pompous word, whose appearance was greater than his fellows. I was watching, and the same horn, the little horn, was making war against the saints and prevailing against them. So if that's the Antichrist, and we're gone, how's he prevailing against us? We're still here. And he prevails against him until the Ancient of Days came. And a judgment was made in favor of the saints of the Most High, and time came for the saints to possess the kingdom. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all other kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, trample it, and break it in pieces. The 10 horns are 10 kings, or kingdoms, who shall arise from this kingdom. Another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the first ones, and shall subdue 3 kings. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and law. Then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time, and times, and half a time. Remember what that means? Time and times? Kerrigan?
3.5 years.
3.5 years. Time is 1 year, times is 2 years, half a time is a half a year. Add them together, you get 3.5. 1 plus 2 plus 0.5 is 3.5. So they shall be given to his hands for 3.5 years. He'll persecute the saints of the Most High for 3.5 years. But the court shall be seated, and they shall take away his dominion to consume and destroy it forever. And the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people, the saints of the Most High. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. So this last kingdom that's going to come upon the earth, we saw in Daniel 2 that it will destroy all the area that encompassed the kingdom of Babylon, the kingdom of the Medo-Persians, and the kingdom of Greece. Wherever they went and conquered, it shall conquer as well. We also saw that in Revelation, the woman sits on it, dressed in scarlet, fiery red, has 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns. Now we understand the 7 crowns better, don't we? Because 3 of them are taken away. Their power is taken away. They're subdued by the Antichrist, so therefore there's no crowns for them. We understand it better now, why there's 7 crowns instead of 10 crowns. We see that from Revelation, this was the devil and his kingdom, which he has control over. And we see that the kingdom of God will strike that kingdom when he comes back. There's probably 2 phases once again. And the 10 toes and the 10 horns represent the 10 powers that this kingdom shall combine. But the combination of these powers, for some reason, is going to be fragile. It'll be strong, but it'll be fragile. And it'll be ruled over the Antichrist, this little horn that pops up and subdues 3 horns, and he will rule over them, and he'll speak pompous words against the Most High God. But in the end, the saints of the Most High will be the ones who will be triumphant, even though they're persecuted and killed and put to death for 3.5 years. But when the Ancient of Days comes and the Son of God comes, they will take over and instill judgment. But this beast, this last beast, is exceedingly great and dreadful, teeth of iron, nails of bronze, and it devours and breaks in pieces whatever is in its way. So this is what we see today. Next time, we'll look at more Revelation 13 and 17. We'll probably go to Ezekiel 38, and talk about that a little bit, and some other passages as well. So it may take one more teaching, it may take 2 more teachings, I'm not sure yet. But this is what we have so far today as we study this issue. Do you have any questions or objections at this point? As far as things to add, I mean, I'm going to be talking about this more, so if you're going to go to other passages, maybe hold off on that for today. If you want to talk about the passages we talked about today and add stuff to that, that'd be great. So open the floor now for that.
Obviously, there's a lot of debate on who the 4th kingdom is.
Right.
I don't want to get into that so much, but I mean, I lean toward an Islamic, revived Ottoman Empire type.
Yep.
4th kingdom.
Yep.
Which would be totally different from the rest of the other beasts. I mean, because it'd be founded upon a religion.
That's right.
Instead of a conqueror kingdom.
Yeah. That's right.
Which would fit, and then.
Yep. definitely makes it different for sure.
When you look at, I've looked at a little bit of Islamic eschatology or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
time
Yep.
study,
Yep.
and it looks pretty similar to what the Antichrist kingdom might look like.
Yeah, they would call the Antichrist would be called the Messiah in their
Yeah.
religion.
Yeah. The Mahdi or something.
Yeah, that's right.
And the 10 kingdoms could easily be 10 Islamic states.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm that's what I lean towards. I don't know about you. I can't 100% say with certainty that's it.
Yeah.
But I don't see the Rome. Like I used to think it might be Rome because
Yeah.
of the iron, but then I saw a point that said where it said it basically it conquered everything that the other kingdoms conquered. Rome didn't do that.
Yeah.
Rome didn't conquer everything that the other kingdoms conquered, but the Ottoman Empire pretty much did.
Yeah.
And Rome really didn't crush everything in its path. They left up like ancient markers. Well, the Ottoman Empire destroys things in its path.
Yeah.
They destroy, any remnant of Jewish history.
Yeah.
They destroy any remnant of Christian history if they can. The real strict ones,
Right.
not all of them.
Yeah.
They change. They try to change history to make it seem like it's not, the strict one.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't. It's hard to grasp in my mind around all that.
Yeah.
How it looks. 'Cause
Yeah.
It's very. But I kind of lean towards that. I
Yeah.
don't know if you can speak to that at all.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to Daniel and the legs of iron and the feet of iron and clay,
Yeah.
I mean, most people who study eschatology and who have a futurist perspective, in other words, they don't believe everything happened in AD 70, they believe that it's a two-phase kingdom.
Yeah.
The disagreement between what that kingdom are, some would say Rome, and the reason why they usually say Rome is because Rome came right after.
Yeah.
Rome conquered the Greek Empire, and so they automatically assume it must be right after. And so they say, well, there's going to be a revived Roman Empire. I mean, I guess it's possible.
Yeah.
I mean, it had to be really far off, because Rome or Italy or the Catholic Church,
Catholic Empire.
whatever they want to say about it, is pretty weak right now.
Yeah, I agree.
So there have to be something happens between now and then that would change a whole lot of things. But we talked about that recently. We talked about mystery or Babylon, the great mother of harlots, that some things have to happen for her too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, at this point, if it's going to happen soon, it's probably going to have to be Muslim. I don't see how it could be anything else.
Me too.
That's the way I see it. And like you said, the whole trampling the residue with your feet, I mean, that seems to describe Islam conquering. When they conquer, they don't let you keep your language, they don't let you, or keep your religion, they let you, promote your religion. You're either going to pay a tax to them or you're going to become a Muslim.
Yeah.
That's really all there is to it. They're going to destroy everything and make it all Muslim.
Right. No,
Whereas, like you said, you study Roman history, they allowed Jews to remain Jews.
right.
Even Christians were allowed to remain Christians, and they got persecuted for a period of time, but they were allowed to remain Christians. And, the most popular language when Jesus was around was Koine Greek, not Roman or Italian. That was never, later on Latin came in centuries later, but you see these things, it doesn't really seem to describe the Roman Empire. Really the only reason I can think of to say it is Rome is that it came right after Greece.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be right after. So, and of course, if it's going to be Rome, they're going to have to say, well, it's the European Union, or there's 10 empires included in it. But we'll get more into that next when we go to Ezekiel 38 and talk about where these people are coming from who are led by the Antichrist, and see where the kingdoms come from and see what the kingdoms are right now. It's not talking about Europe. So we'll get more into that next week, Lord willing. But I think it seems pretty obvious to me what it is at this point. The only conclusion I can come to this point is Islam.
Yeah.
At this point. But things can change. So I'm not putting my stake down just yet.
Yeah. Thanks, bro.
Yeah.
Are you going to go into Revelation 17, like 9 through 11?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Big time.
All right.
Yeah, it's going to be important. Yeah, that'll either be next time or time after. Yep, for sure. I thought about doing that today, but it's just too much at one time, I think. That you can almost do a whole teaching on that, just that. So, and people try to, I don't want to get to it, but verse 9, people try to say the 7 mountains, that's Rome too.
Yeah.
So I don't believe that. We'll get into that next time though. But yeah, so the thing that we looked at today, I mean, it seems like, you look at, one thing you could do, you could look back through history, whether it's biblical history or history outside of the Bible, and study these different kingdoms and see what they're like. They're pretty rough, the way they would conquer people sometimes. You gotta understand the last kingdom is gonna be much worse than the other kingdoms that came before it. So I'll give you an idea. You can also study the Ottoman Empire. I encourage you guys to study that. Nothing wrong with studying history. We don't take external history from the Bible as, not on the same level as God's word, as far as reliability and trustworthiness. But it'd be good to read those things, to understand those things a little bit. Help you understand what the scripture's talking about here. From Daniel's perspective, all those things, besides the kingdom he was living in, was all future. So for us, most of it's past.
Yeah.
Except for the last kingdom. It'd be good to study those things.
Yeah, and one thing about the Rome aspect is
Yeah.
that, like it says in Daniel, the people of the prince who is to come.
Yeah. Yep. That's right. Daniel 9.
How Rome would use the
Yep.
Arabs
Yep.
to actually fight, to conquer.
That's right.
And so the people of the prince who is to come, that would have that Roman aspect, but it wasn't actually Romans, but it was actually Arabs that were used.
That's right.
So it has that connection too.
That's right, bro.
To Rome.
Amen. Yeah, Daniel 9, we can just go to it real quick. It's just, Brother Kevin's already bringing it up. Okay, so Daniel 9. We'll start in verse 24. It says 70 weeks, and weeks just means sevens, group of sevens. A week is 7 days, but it's a group of seven. 70 weeks, 70 sevens are determined for your people and for your holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness. Of course, making an end of sin and bringing everlasting righteousness has not happened yet. To seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. That last part makes me think of 1 Corinthians 13. And the perfect has come, prophecy will be done away with. So to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. So Jesus will return at some point. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. That's 483 years. If those groups of sevens are years, 483 years. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublesome times. And after the 62 weeks, the Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end of it shall be with a flood. Until the end of the war, desolations are determined. And he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering, and a wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation is determined, is poured out on the desolate. So this prince who is to come, in verse 26, is the Antichrist. He's the one in verse 27, he shall make a covenant with many for 1 week. So that actually helps us determine when the last 7 years starts, when the Antichrist comes, makes a covenant with the people of Israel. But he is the prince who is to come, and he shall destroy the city. The people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and sanctuary. That's talking about AD 70. Let's go back to AD 70. Who destroyed the sanctuary and the most holy place and wiped it out? So it looks like there's nothing ever been there. But that's Rome, right? But as Brother Kevin pointed out, the people who actually destroyed it, the actual leader of that Roman army did not want to destroy it. Okay? But the Arabs in that area, they weren't Muslims, there wasn't Islam at that point in time, but the Arabs in that area, they were the ones that were so hateful, so angry towards, hated the Israelites, they destroyed their temple themselves.
Right.
And by the time it was all on fire, they couldn't stop it. So,
To me, is that such a connection
Yeah.
to how this last kingdom will be an Islamic kingdom.
it's going to be Arab.
Because it's Arab.
That's right, it's going to be an Arab kingdom.
And so the prince, the people of the prince,
Right.
who is to come, the Arabs are the people.
Yeah,
The prince to come is going to be an Arab or
Yeah.
related to that.
That's
Some-
right.
in some type of way related to that.
that's right. Because the Roman Empire, when they were ruling, they had a huge kingdom. They didn't have enough Italians to have soldiers all over the place. So they had militias all over the place. People, I don't know if they called it militia back then, but they had people recruited from that area to be in there, to be soldiers for them.
Like a conscripted army or
Yeah.
something like that, where they would get the people groups from
Yeah.
other areas to fight.
Basically a militia, for lack of better terms. And they weren't necessarily as trained as the Romans would be. They'd be the most trained, the highly trained soldiers, but they were still soldiers nonetheless.
And in this case, they didn't have to really motivate them very much.
No, they didn't have to. That's right.
You know, they had a satanic hatred
That's right.
that goes way back
To Ishmael.
to Ishmael.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. All the way back to Ishmael is what it goes back to. That's been going on forever. So you see, one man mistake he makes. Abraham listened to the voice of his wife instead of the voice of God. And how that's caused such destruction for so many people for so long. So, but yeah, that's a good point, brother. They use that to try to promote that it's going to be a revived Roman Empire. But you look into the details of it, you see the details of it, you find these things out. So, amen. All right, well, we'll stop there for now. Let's begin to prepare our hearts. Hopefully you've already been doing that. If you've been worshiping the Lord this morning, earlier, you've already been doing that, preparing yourself for this time. Really throughout the whole week, you should be examining yourself to make sure you're being holy. If you sin, you're confessing it, repenting of it immediately, and putting up boundaries to make sure it doesn't happen again. Right? So let's make sure we're clean before the Lord before we come up here and partake of the symbolic body and blood of the Lord, proclaiming his death until he comes. Amen?